Saturday came with sunlight pouring through the kitchen windows. Emily stood at the counter arranging vegetables when she heard a knock on the door. Her heart jumped. She wiped her hands quickly on a towel and opened it to find James standing there, holding a grocery bag and looking slightly embarrassed. "I brought some things," he said, "though I'm not sure if I picked the right stuff." Emily smiled, her nerves tightening in her chest. "That's fine. We'll make it work." James stepped inside, and for a moment the air felt different, charged with something new. He placed the bag on the counter, and together they started unpacking. Out came carrots, potatoes, onions, and a loaf of bread that looked like it had been chosen in haste. "You're already doing better than you think," Emily said, arranging the items. "At least nothing's burnt yet." James laughed, a warm sound that made the kitchen feel brighter. "Give me time." They began chopping and stirring, moving carefully around each other in the small space. At first it was awkward. He bumped her elbow. She reached for a knife just as he did, but soon they found a rhythm. He teased her about being too precise with her slices, and she laughed when he tried to dice an onion and ended up tearing up so badly he had to step back. Michael appeared in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, watching the two of them. He didn't say anything, just observed the way his mother laughed. Trilly laughed. Not the polite kind she used around neighbors or coworkers. It was the kind of laughter he hadn't heard in years. "Do you need help?" Michael finally asked. Emily turned, startled. "You helping in the kitchen?" Michael shrugged. "I just came to see what's going on." James grinned. "We're teaching your mom's secret recipes, though I think she's keeping the real secrets from me." Emily shook her head, amused. "If I told you everything at once, you'd never come back." The three of them worked together until the pot simmered with a hearty stew. The smell filled the kitchen, richer than it had in months. James reached for the spoon, dipped it into the broth, and tasted it. At that moment, his hand brushed against Emily's. The touch was brief, accidental, but it sent a wave through her chest so strong she almost dropped the ladle. She quickly turned away, pretending to check the oven, her face warm. It had been so long since a simple touch had startled her like that. She tried to steady herself, focusing on the bread she needed to slice. But her hands shook slightly. James didn't say anything, but his eyes followed her carefully. He had felt it too. Michael noticed the shift in the air. He didn't tease, though he could have. Instead, he quietly slipped into the living room, giving them space. He understood more than his mother realized. Dinner that night was simple but full of laughter. James told a story about his failed attempt to cook pasta years ago, and Emily nearly choked on her food from laughing so hard. Michael joined in, adding his own jokes, and for once the table didn't feel heavy with silence. It felt alive again after James left. The house grew quiet. Emily stood in the kitchen putting away dishes when Michael walked in. He grabbed a spoon and dipped it into the leftover stew, tasting it like he always did. This time, he said with a grin, "It tastes right." Emily raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Michael set the spoon down. "Because you were smiling while you made it." Her breath caught. She stared at her son, realizing how much he had longed for her to find happiness again. She thought she had been protecting him by keeping her heart guarded. But maybe she had only been showing him half a life. Emily touched his shoulder gently. "You really think this is what Dad would want?" Michael nodded without hesitation. "I know it is." That night, when she lay in bed, Emily replayed the day in her mind. The laughter, the clumsy moments, the brief touch that sent her heart racing. She hadn't expected any of it. She hadn't expected to feel alive again. She turned on her side, staring at the shadows on the wall. She wasn't ready to call it love. Not yet. But something had shifted. Something she couldn't deny. The food had tasted different. The house had felt warmer. And her heart, though still fragile, had stirred with feelings she thought she had lost forever. And for the first time in a long time, Emily fell asleep with hope instead of loneliness. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of Emily's kitchen began to change. James had become a familiar presence. Every Saturday, he arrived with groceries and a willingness to try. sometimes failing, sometimes surprising them both with a small success. Emily found herself laughing more, teasing him about his mistakes, and discovering patience she hadn't realized she still had. Michael watched quietly from the living room most of the time, satisfied to see his mother smile without restraint. One evening, James stayed later than usual. Michael had gone upstairs to finish homework, and the house was softer, quieter, with the golden light of sunset spilling through the windows. Emily and James were at the counter, cleaning up the day's mess of dishes and chopping boards. For a moment, they worked in silence, comfortable. The kind of silence that comes with familiarity. "You don't have to do this," Emily said suddenly, handing him a towel. "I know," James replied softly, taking it with a small smile. "But I want to. It feels right." The words hung in the air between them, simple yet loaded. Emily paused, drying her hands, feeling the flutter in her chest that had returned weeks ago when his hand had brushed hers. It was subtle now, steady, like a reminder that life could still surprise her. "You've changed the kitchen," she admitted, her voice gentle. "Not just with the cooking, but everything." James looked at her eyes, reflecting a mix of warmth and something deeper, something that Emily had almost forgotten existed: hope. "You've changed it, too," he said. "It feels like home again." She felt the weight of those words. Home. That word had felt empty for years. But tonight, it resonated differently. It wasn't just a house or a place to eat. It was the feeling of laughter, warmth, and connection returning. She realized that she had been protecting her heart, thinking she was being strong, but in truth, she had been half alive. James wasn't replacing Daniel, he was helping her remember how to live. Emily's thoughts drifted to Michael. He had noticed the subtle changes to how the house seemed brighter, how his mother laughed freely, and how the food tasted richer when shared. His quiet approval was like a blessing she didn't even realize she needed. Michael had always wanted her to be happy again, and now she finally understood that she could as they finished washing the last dish. James moved closer to place it on the drying rack. Their hands brushed lightly, and this time Emily didn't pull away. The brief contact sparked something warm and steady, a quiet acknowledgement of connection. She looked at him, noticing the gentle way he watched her, the care in his expression. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was patient, comforting, and real. Just then, Michael appeared at the top of the stairs, peeking down at the two of them. He smiled knowingly, his presence reminding Emily that this wasn't just about her. It was about creating a home, a life, and a future for all of them. Dinner smelled amazing tonight. Michael called down, walking toward the kitchen. He tasted a bit of the leftover stew, as he always did, then looked up at both Emily and James. "Now this is perfect," he said. Emily felt her chest tighten, a combination of relief and joy. She realized that perfection wasn't about recipes or ingredients. It was about love, presence, and shared moments. Seeing James here, laughing with her, being part of their lives, made her realize that she had been holding back unnecessarily. Life could move forward without dishonoring the past. James leaned against the counter, smiling at both of them. "I think I finally understand why you love this kitchen so much," he said. "It's not the cooking. It's everything else: the people, the laughter, the moments." Emily nodded, her eyes misting slightly. "I forgot that for a while," she admitted. "I thought happiness belonged only to the past, to Daniel. But it doesn't. It can be here too, if I let it." Michael grinned, his face lighting up. "I knew you'd see it, Mom. You just needed a little help." The evening settled softly around them. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of pink and gold in the sky. The kitchen, once quiet and empty, was filled with warmth and connection. Emily realized that the real flavor missing from her life hadn't been in the food at all. It had been in the shared smiles, the laughter, the gentle touches, and the quiet support of someone who cared deeply. That night, after tucking Michael into bed, Emily returned to the kitchen. James had gone home, but the feeling he left lingered like the aroma of fresh herbs. She stood at the counter, glancing around the room that had seen so much grief and quiet, and smiled. The kitchen had become alive again, not just with food, but with love, hope, and new beginnings. Emily understood something fundamental now. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant opening her heart carefully, letting life surprise her, and embracing the warmth that had returned. She could love, laugh, and share meals again. It would all feel right as she turned off the lights and headed to her room. Emily knew one thing for certain. Her son's wish had come true, even if indirectly. She had allowed herself to feel again, to let someone into her life, and to see that home was about more than walls or tables. It was about connection, trust, and love in its quiet, steady form. Emily stood in her quiet kitchen, the sound of a spoon tapping against the pot echoing louder than it should have. The stew on the stove bubbled gently, filling the room with a scent of tomatoes and herbs, yet it didn't carry the warmth it once did. Cooking had always been more than just making food for her family. Years ago, when her husband Daniel was alive, it had been the highlight of their evenings. They would stand shoulder to shoulder, tasting, seasoning, and laughing at their mistakes until the house was alive with chatter. But now, since his passing, the kitchen felt hollow. She cooked because she had to, not because she wanted to. Her son Michael, 18 and growing into a man faster than she was ready for, walked into the kitchen. His footsteps were casual, but his presence shifted the air. He had Daniel's height, Daniel's posture. Even the way he leaned against the doorframe reminded her of the man she had lost. Without asking, he reached for a spoon, dipped it into the pot, and tasted the stew. Emily almost told him not to, but she held back, curious what he would say. Michael swallowed, looked at her with a thoughtful expression, and said, "It's good, Mom, but it doesn't taste like before." His words struck deeper than he could have imagined. Emily froze, her hand tightening around the spoon in her grasp. She knew exactly what he meant. The flavors were there, the seasoning, the salt, the heat, but something was missing, something beyond ingredients. The meals she made now lacked the life they once carried. They were meals of routine, not of joy. Michael, with his young honesty, had noticed. Emily tried to smile, but it came out weak. "I guess I'm a little out of practice," she murmured. Michael shook his head. "It's not that. It's just, you don't cook the same way anymore." He paused, then added softly, "Dad wouldn't want you to always be alone." The words hung in the air like a heavy curtain. Emily turned her face back to the stove, blinking quickly as if the steam might be the reason her eyes stung. She didn't expect such a statement from him. For 2 years she had convinced herself that keeping busy, cooking, and working around the house was enough. She told herself she was being strong for her son. But Michael had seen through her. She stirred the stew, but her mind was far away. Could she ever share this kitchen with someone again? The thought seemed foreign, almost impossible. And yet a quiet voice deep inside her stirred, reminding her that she used to love having someone by her side, not just for cooking, but for life. Michael stepped closer, his tone gentle but firm. "Mom, you always made food taste better when you were happy. Maybe if you weren't doing it all alone, it would feel like that again." Emily turned to look at him. He was only 18, but in that moment, he sounded so much older, like a man who had seen more than he should at his age. He wasn't just talking about food. He was talking about her heart. Her throat tightened, and she set the spoon down with care. She wanted to tell him she was fine, that she didn't need anyone, but the words wouldn't come, because deep down she knew he was right. Michael gave her a small smile, trying to lighten the moment. "Anyway, the stew's not bad. It just needs something." Then he left the kitchen, leaving Emily standing in the soft glow of the overhead light, the pot still bubbling in front of her. She pressed her hands against the counter, her mind racing. He was only a boy, but his words had opened a door she had firmly shut for years. Maybe the missing flavor wasn't in the spice rack at all. Maybe it was in the part of her heart she had buried with Daniel. Emily stood there for a long time after Michael left, staring at the pot, but tasting only memories. And for the first time in years, she wondered if her son was right, if she was meant to cook with someone again. The next morning, Emily pushed a cart down the grocery store aisle, her list half forgotten in her hand. She wasn't really thinking about what she needed. Her mind kept drifting back to Michael's words from the night before. "Why don't you cook with someone again?" He had said it so simply, but the meaning behind it felt too heavy to ignore. She had spent 2 years telling herself she didn't need anyone, that she was managing fine. But the truth was, her life had become quiet in a way that sometimes felt unbearable. She paused by the shelf of canned tomatoes, staring without really seeing. That's when she heard a voice behind her. "Emily." She turned quickly, almost dropping the can in her hand. Standing a few feet away was James Turner, an old neighbor from years ago. His hair was grayer now, his face lined with time, but his eyes still held the same steady kindness she remembered. He had lost his wife Claire, around the same time Emily had lost Daniel. They hadn't seen each other in years. "James," Emily said, surprised. "I didn't expect to run into you here." James smiled, a little shy, as if he too wasn't sure what to say. "I just moved back into town. Thought I'd pick up some groceries, though I'll admit I have no idea what I'm doing anymore." Cooking was always Claire's thing. Emily gave a small laugh. "I know that feeling. Cooking feels different when you're alone." For a moment, they both stood there sharing the kind of silence that came from mutual understanding. It wasn't awkward. It was almost comforting. Like meeting someone who spoke the same quiet language of loss. James glanced at her cart, then back at her. "You always used to cook amazing dinners. Remember those neighborhood barbecues? Claire and I used to look forward to them." Emily smiled faintly at the memory, though it carried a sting. "That was a long time ago, maybe," James said. "But I still remember. You know, I never learned to cook properly. Claire tried to teach me once, but I burned everything." He chuckled, then his expression softened. "If you ever feel like showing me, I'd be grateful. I could use the help." Emily hesitated, caught off guard. Teach him. The idea felt strange, but also oddly natural. She hadn't let anyone into her kitchen in years. The thought of standing beside someone again, sharing space and laughter, both scared her and stirred something deep inside. "I don't know if I'd be much of a teacher these days," she said lightly, though her voice trembled just enough for him to notice. James's eyes warmed. "I think you'd be better than you think. And besides, I could use the company." For a second, Emily didn't answer. Then she nodded slowly. "Maybe we could try one day?" "Good," James said, his smile growing. "I'll hold you to that." When she got home and told Michael about the meeting, his reaction was immediate. His eyes lit up with hope. "Mom, that's perfect." He said, "You should invite him over. It'll be fun. And you always say food tastes better when it's shared." Emily gave him a look, unsure whether to laugh or scold. "You don't think it's strange? Me, cooking with someone else?" Michael shook his head firmly. "No, I think it's what you need. Dad wouldn't want you to close yourself off forever." His words struck her again, but this time they didn't hurt as much. Instead, they felt like a gentle push toward something she had been too afraid to consider. Maybe she did need this. Maybe her son could see what she couldn't that night. After Michael went to bed, Emily sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, her thoughts spinning. She thought of Daniel, of how much he had loved the way she cooked. The way he would sneak tastes before dinner was ready, laughing when she swatted his hand away. She wondered if letting someone else into this space meant she was betraying his memory. But then she remembered his laughter, his way of always wanting her to be happy. Perhaps, she thought, he would have wanted her to keep living, not just surviving. The kettle clicked softly in the background, and Emily closed her eyes. She could almost picture James in the kitchen, fumbling with a knife, laughing at his own mistakes. For the first time in years, she felt the tiniest flicker of curiosity. What would it be like to cook with someone again? By the time she went to bed, she hadn't made any decisions. But she knew one thing for sure. Michael was right. Something had to change. And maybe, just maybe, James's unexpected invitation was the beginning of that change.